we are back in our home stadium, ready to go.
With the wallpaper behind
us, right? The artificial background, the AI generated artificial background. Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Jeffrey and Chava Bela Wald, Le'ilui Nishmas Jeff's father, Mr. Roman Wald, Avraham Ben Shmuel Zichron Levracha, and grandfather, Mr. Menachem Eisner, Menachem Mendel Ben Mordechai Zichron Levracha, whose yortzites were on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The Neshama should have an aliyah. And we are also sponsored by Shmuli and Miriam Fuchs for the month. Le'ilui Nishmas, Shmuli's mother, Bela Yenta Bas Chuna Zichron Levracha, whose yortzeit is on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, and may her Neshama have an aliyah. And we are less than 40 pages away from the end of the Masechta, if you can believe it. Wow. We are going to finish up the 6th parak, which is the 10th parak in Mishnayos, as we said, that it's interesting, sort of out of order, different order. Not sure why, but it is a different order. And the home stretch. Well, not really yet, but almost. But once we flip into volume 3, that's the home stretch, right? So that's where we are on Ayin Beis Amud Aleph. Second line, Kotzrin mipnei hanatios mipnei beis ha'avel mipnei beis ha'midrash. We said that you're not allowed to harvest any barley or any other grain, any of the 5 types of grain, before the Omer. And we said, though, that you can cut the grain down if you have an alternative reason. Like, for example, you need to make space for mourners, or you need to make space to create a base medrash. My taima, the Gemara says, why is that? Because the pasuk says that the prohibition against harvesting is kitzirchem. The omer should be the first of your harvest. Amar Rachmana velo kitzir mitzvah. That means it's your harvest, not a mitzvah harvest. We have the similar drashos when it comes to osek b'mitzvah, patur min mitzvah. It says that you're supposed to do the mitzvos, right? B'shivtecha b'veisach u'velechtecha v'derech. We have a shema, right? When you are sitting in your house, when you're going on the way. But if you were going on to do a mitzvah, so then you're patur from other mitzvahs. So we're from the same kind of a thing. So here also, if you are doing a mitzvah, so it is example, but I would point out
when Hatzel gets a call, they're going to do a mitzvah by saving a box.
They would be patur from other mitzvahs, and so it is interesting to note that interestingly the mitzvah that is included here is the mourner, right? And that seems like at best a minhag. It's not deraisa mitzvahs. So the idea, the concept of osik b'mitzvah patur mitzvah, or in this circumstance that the Torah says it has to be your harvesting, it's not your harvesting, even includes if you're doing a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So that means that if I'm in the middle of a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, right, I'm listening to the Megillah, right, so that when somebody comes up and wants to have me give them tzedakah, I'm osik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. Since I'm already listening to the Megillah, I wouldn't interrupt that in order to be able to give tzedakah, a Torah mitzvah, right? Osik b'mitzvah, same thing here, right? Something that is a d'Rabbanan is not my harvesting. Okay, that's an interesting point. Lo yaseh krichos aval manichon tzivasim. You're not allowed to. You're not supposed to bundle them up, but you just let them lie there. My time. What's the reason for that? Dekama de efshar lo tarchinon. We want to stay away from using them as much as possible, right? The less you touch this grain, the less chance you're going to come to eat it. So just let it go. Mitzvah omer lahavi min hakama. There's a mitzvah to bring the omer from that which is standing, meaning that it's already still planted. That it is still planted in the ground. You're supposed to cut it down specifically for the sake of the mitzvah of the korban omer. Tana Rabbana Rabbi learn. Vim takriv minchas bikurim. The pasuk in that talks about the omer says in last week's parsha that if you are going to bring a minchas bikurim, right, the mincha of the first fruits, ma tamid lomer. Now, why does it say that? It says takriv. Right, the rest of the pasuk continues on and repeats the word takriv es minchas bikurecha. So it says the word takriv double. The answer is lefisha mitzvahs ha'omer lahavi min hakama. It's to tell you that you know that there are certain mitzvos that are part of the mitzvah, part of the bringing of the korban omer, but the fact that it says takriv twice tells me that if I can't perform that mitzvah, then it doesn't stop me from performing the mitzvah, performing the omer anyway without that special part of the mitzvah. So therefore, lefisha mitzvah omer lahavi min hakama. It is a mitzvah to bring the omer from standing fresh grain. Minayin shim lo matz min hakama yavi min ha'omarin. So what if you can't find any non-harvested barley? Somebody's already harvested all the barley. What do you do then? I can bring it from other pre-harvested barley, because Talmud Lomar takriv, I should bring it in any event.
Are you allowed to buy barley from someone else that was harvested?
That's what it sounds like, right? Buy yourself barley from someplace else. Davar acher, another point to make on it. Takriv, it says takriv lefisha mitzvah lahavi min alach. Another thing we said, that it is a mitzvah to bring fresh, right? Not dried up. How do I know that if you can't find fresh, I can bring dry? Talmud Lomar again, takriv, bring it in any event, even if you can't do it the best way. Davar acher, another thing. Similarly, takriv, it says that you shall bring it lefi shemitzvaso liktzor balayla. It is best to harvest the omer at night. It's a mitzvah to do it at night. She'im niktzor bayom kosher. But if you don't harvest it at night and you have to go and harvest it during the day, so it's still going to be kosher because the pasuk says takriv. And v'doches haShabbos. Also, it pushes off Shabbos. That if the omer comes on Shabbos, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says takriv, you'd better bring it. Meaning, even if you can't do it in the way that it doesn't violate Shabbos, you can't do it in a way that you bring it fresh. Even though you can't bring it in a way that would be the nicest, because it happens to be Shabbos, bring it anyway, even if it violates Shabbos. Takriv kol. So,
what would you allowed to be Mechal Shabbos for this?
Sorry.
What would he be allowed to be?
Because it says takriv, right? The pasuk tells you takriv, therefore you can even violate Shabbos, right? Kolshu. Takriv mikol makom. You bring it in any type of barley you can find. Bring it mikol makom in any place. If you can't find the barley, as we said, best to bring it from Yerushalayim. Can't bring it from Yerushalayim. Bring it from any place inside of Eretz Yisrael. And takriv vafilu b'Shabbos, and bring it even if it comes out that it's Shabbos. Takriv vafilu b'tuma, and you should also bring it even if the omer, even if it is brought in tuma, because we said that tuma is either hutra or dechuya b'tzibur, meaning if it's a community offering, I could still bring it. Now, don't we always?
Can you find any more barley in Israel? Can you find them from Chutz?
No, you cannot. That we said was a requirement. Moshe v'sech the pasuk says, right, and it can't be from any other grain, can't be from outside of Eretz Yisrael. We had said, we know that the rule is always a korban tzibur is brought betuma. So why do we need a special pasuk? Why was it telling us that you can bring it here even if it's betuma? And generally speaking, the reason for that is that if you wind up in a circumstance where you can't bring it with tahara, right? If you've already brought it, is it valid? This is telling us that in most of these circumstances, although you might think, you know what, like most circumstances, if I didn't do the mitzvah, so then, and I already finished the korban, then is the korban valid? Yes, it is. This is actually telling us that even if you didn't do the korban yet, and you're going to proceed and finish the korban, thereby violating the positive commandment to be fulfilling it in the best way, nevertheless, you should still go ahead and do it anyway, right? Even if you're going to violate the positive commandment to do these special mitzvahs. Okay, the Mishnah said, Niktzer bayom kosher. You're supposed to harvest the korban omer during the nighttime, right? As we had said, that it's supposed to be that you're supposed to harvest it so that and then count, and you need sheva shavuos tamimos, you need full weeks. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the counting is done at night. Therefore, the harvesting is done at night. That's what we had said before. Mm-hmm. Now, this Mishnah says, but if they harvested it during the day, it would also be valid. V'hatnan, but we learned in a Mishnah in Maseches Megillah, Kol halayla kosher liktziras haomer. All night long is kosher for harvesting the korban omer, ulahaktir chalavim ve'ivarim. And the other mitzvah that you can do all night is to burn the fats and the limbs on the mizbeach. Ze'akal, here's the rule. Davar shemitzvaso bayom, anytime you have a mitzvah, which has to be done during the day, kosher kol hayom. You've got all day to do it. V'davar shemitzvaso balayla, and when you have a mitzvah that has to be done at night, kosher kol halayla, you've got all night to do it. Now, Katani, it says Laila Dumya Dayom. It says nighttime, which is similar to the daytime. Ma Dayom Balayla Lo. So this Mishnah is comparing daytime mitzvahs to nighttime mitzvahs. If you have a daytime mitzvah, you can't do it at night, right? If it's a daytime, so too after Laila Bayom Namilo. So too the nighttime mitzvahs that are listed here cannot be done during the day. So therefore, how are you harvesting the omer, which is on the list, when harvesting the omer is a nighttime mitzvah? You shouldn't be allowed to do it during the day. So Amar Rabba says lo kasha. It's not a problem because Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. It is an argument between Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Okay, because Ditanya we learn a brisa. Haya omed umakriv minchas haomer. Right. Let's say it comes to be the 16th, the morning of the 16th, and everybody made a whole big celebration. They harvested the Omer the night before. They come to the Beis HaMikdash, and they're ready to bring the Korban HaOmer, and something happens. It becomes Tameh. Now you've got a Korban, and it's Tameh. Then it makes Ve'im yesh acheres. So if there's more wheat, more barley outside, so then Omrim lo havei acheres tachtao. They say, go outside, cut some more wheat. Barley. Cut some more barley and bring that. Right? Better to not do it betuma, so go cut it now during the daytime. Ve'im lav, but if there's no other barley available, omrum lehavi pikech shtok, then just be smart and stay quiet. Right? It's not. We don't advertise the fact that it's tameh. Right? Better people don't know. Just keep quiet. But go ahead and again go forward. Huh?
They don't know can't hurt you.
Right. What you don't know can't hurt you. Divrei Rebbe. That's what Rebbe says. So Rebbe tells you you can harvest it during the day. Right? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, no, bein kach ubein kach. It doesn't matter if you've got more to do. You've got more that you can cut. Either way, Omrim lo hevi pikech shtok. We just tell them, just be smart and stay quiet. Why? Shekol Omer shenitzar shelo k'mitzvah zol pasul. If it's harvested not at nighttime, it's pasul. So therefore, that's the question. It's an argument between Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, whether you can harvest it during the daytime. Okay, so that is what's going on there. Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Bar Bachana says in Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Beshitas Rabbi Akiva, Rabbo Shel Aviv Amara. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon is echoing the sentiment of his father's Rebbe, right? Rabbi Shimon was one of the students of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's right. That's who he was, right? He's Rabbi Shimon. This is Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, who is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Right, so he's one of Rabbi Akiva's students. Ditznan. So here's what it says in the Mishnah. Klal Amar Rabbi Akiva. Here's what Rabbi Akiva said. Here's a general rule. Kol malacha she'efshar lo la'asosa me'erev Shabbos. When it comes to bris milah, right, you're allowed to violate Shabbos in order to do a bris milah. However, you're not allowed to violate Shabbos in order to prepare for a bris milah. Whatever you can do before Shabbos, you've got to do. Meaning, bring the knife to shul before Shabbos. Right. No need to carry the knife on Shabbos to shul. Right? So whatever you can do beforehand, do it beforehand. And so there he says, Kol malach she'efshar lo la'asos me'erev Shabbos. Any of the malachos that you can do beforehand, ein do docha es Shabbos. You cannot violate Shabbos for those things. You got to prepare beforehand. Right? And by contrast, right, if you've got something that you can't do, right, the bris milah itself, that has to be done. Okay, but you can only, Rabbi Akiva Shitas, you can only do the things that you have to do. So therefore, okay, so now, Savar law, Rabbi Yishmael, and also Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, holds like Rabbi Yishmael. He says, the Omar, Ktsiras HaOmer mitzvah, that the harvesting of the Omer is a mitzvah, and it's doche Shabbos. It pushes off Shabbos. Ditznan, we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael says, Ma charish rishus, just like the Torah tells you on Shabbos, you're not allowed to harvest, you're not allowed to plow, and plowing is something that there's never an obligation to plow. So af katzir rishus. So too, when the Torah tells you you're not allowed to harvest, it means harvesting when it's not an obligation to harvest. Yatza k'tzir ha'omer she'i mitzvah, which excludes the harvesting for the omer, which is a mitzvah that isn't a violation of Shabbos. Okay, so now what comes out is that it is harvesting must be done at nighttime. It cannot be done earlier or later, or there's no flexibility about it. Because the fact that it must be done at a specific time, according to Rabbi Akiva, is what makes it push off Shabbos. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon is the one who holds that you cannot harvest the Omer during the daytime. You must harvest it at night. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to push off Shabbos. Rebbe, on the other hand, holds, no, it can be done during the daytime. Okay, now, if you would hold that even though the Torah says you should harvest it at night, you can go ahead and harvest it during the day anyway, that would be kosher, a maidachi Shabbos. Then how could harvesting the Omer push off Shabbos? Niktzre me'erev Shabbos. If harvesting it at the right time is only a mitzvah, and if you don't harvest it at the right time, it's acceptable, then you should harvest it before Shabbos. And don't violate Shabbos at all. Ela midadochi Shabbos, from the fact that harvesting the Omer pushes off Shabbos, shma mina, you can see from there, niktzar shalok mitzvah so puzzle, that if you don't harvest it at night, then it invalidates it. And that is where Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon gets his position from. You cannot harvest this Omer during the day. Now, great. Problem is, Rebbe Lav Talmidei de Rabbi Shimon, who? Rebbe was also a student of Rabbi Shimon's, right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rebbe was also Rabbi Shimon's Talmud. And so therefore, why, if Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon is following his father's Rebbe, why doesn't Rebbe follow his Rebbe's Rebbe? Right? V'hatanya, we learn a brisa. Amar Rebbe says, Keshahayinu lemedin Torah etzel Rabbi Shimon betekoa. He tells the story one time, I was in learning Torah by Rabbi Shimon in the place called Tekoa. Hayinu ma'alin lo shemen ve'aluntis mechatzer. So what we did is, he needed to go take a bath. Now, we don't take baths on Shabbos, but that became a prohibition that was later on. Originally, at that point, it wasn't prohibited for them. But the issue was, he had to get his towel and his oil to the bathhouse. So how did they get it from his house to the bathhouse?
Was there Erev there?
There was no Erev there, right? So what they did was, Malalo shemen ve'aluntis, they took his oil and his towel, mechatzer legag, from the courtyard, which was enclosed, to the roof, which was on top of Rosh Hashayachid, umigag lekarpef, and they went from the roof to a courtyard area, which was had a boundary around it, a fence around there, and then they went from there mikarpef lekarpef acher. They then went from that side courtyard, which was fenced in, to another one that was fenced in, and they kept going from Rosh Hashayachid to Rosh Hashayachid, right? Ad she'anu magin lemayan she'anu rachtzim bo.
They did B'shima because one of their
Yeah. Right. So they went and they finally got to the bathhouse, right? So so he was right. Clearly, well, why is that? So now Rebbe, right? He was Rabbi Shimon's Talmud, right? And who was a student of Rabbi Akiva, right? So therefore, why isn't he following Rabbi Akiva's shita and saying that you're not not allowed to harvest the Omer at night? Why does Rebbe say you are allowed to harvest the Omer during the day? So the answer is, Savar Idach de Rabbi Shimon. Rebbe is holding like another thing that Rabbi Shimon said. You're right, Rabbi Shimon was his Rebbe. But he's holding, Rabbi Shimon said another thing. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Amar Rabbi Shimon, another thing in error that Rabbi Shimon says in a Tosefta in Erechim. He says, Borei kama chaviva mitzvah b'shata. He says, let me tell you, it's really good to do a mitzvah at the right time, right? Even if it's not obligatory to do it at that time, but it's the right time to do it. It is really preferred. Sharei hekter chalavim ve'ivarim. When it comes to burning the fats and the limbs of the karbonos, ksherim kol halayla. It is kosher to do them all night long. You could do that at any time. You have all night to do it. Lo hayamamtin lahem ad shetechshach. Right? So they nevertheless, right? They didn't wait to get started until Motzei Shabbos, right? They started it while it was already, while before Shabbos ended. Right? They got started. Now, you could have waited. They could have waited until Tseis, and they could have waited until Rabbeinu Tam, and they could have waited until later. But no, they wanted to get started on this right away, and they before Havdalah, right? They came out and they started burning it right away. Now, why? So the answer is, it seems, right, for Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, so therefore it seems that he holds that even if it's not obligatory to do it at that time, you have another option to do it. Nevertheless, doing it for the sake of a mitzvah is enough to violate Shabbos. Okay, so that's where the argument is two different things that Rabbi Shimon said. So now comes the question, how do you understand what Rabbi Shimon is doing here, right? One Rabbi Shimon seems to say, you gotta do it only if you only violate Shabbos if you have to do it then. And then another Rabbi Shimon seems to say, as long as it's a mitzvah. So Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, lo shmielei. Does Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, he doesn't have this extra teaching that Rabbi Shimon said, that you can do it, that you can violate Shabbos as long as there's a mitzvah, right? Elashani Hasam, he says that's different. Sharei dachsa shchita as a Shabbos, because the shchita of that korban already pushed off Shabbos. Earlier in the day, you shechted that korban. How'd you do that? Because the korban is already docha Shabbos. Once the korban is already docha Shabbos, then best to do the rest of this korban in the best way possible, and that violates, right? But the Omer, why harvest it then? Harvest it off Shabbos. You didn't do any other. There was no other avera there was no other malacha that you had to avoid doing it on Shabbos. So Rabbi Hachanami dachsa shchita as a Shabbos. So therefore, also Rabbi could also say that. Why does Rabbi then say that's a distinction? Why does Rabbi allow you to cut the Omer on Shabbos during the day? So Ella kasava Rabbi holds k'tzirasa Omer lo dachya Shabbos. No, Rabbi must hold that you're right. Okay, we're going to have to come to the conclusion. If Rabbi allows you to cut the Omer during the day, must be Rabbi holds that you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos because you could have done it before. That has to be our conclusion. Vilo, is that true? Rabbi holds that you're not allowed to cut the Omer on Shabbos. V'hatnan, we learned in a Mishnah. We had learned it last week, right? It didn't matter whether you were harvesting the Omer on Shabbos or not. The Chachamim say you always had 3 people cutting it. Well, that means you're bringing it on Shabbos. So the answer is, Delo Rabbi, you're right. That Mishnah must not be going according to Rabbi Shita, because Rabbi says they couldn't do it. Okay? And then furthermore, Chachamim say, Echad Shabbos ve'echad Chol, b'shlosh kupos, b'shlosh magos. The Chachamim said, it doesn't matter whether it's a weekday, whether or not, you can do it with 3 people, with 3 baskets, with 3 sides. Again, Delo Rabbi, that's not Rabbi's Shita. Shabbos Omer Lahem Shabbos Zu. Remember, they're making the announcements. Is it Shabbos? And they're going, yeah, it's Shabbos. So Delok Rabbi. Rabbi doesn't say that. Rabbi doesn't say they didn't do it. Okay. So, what about this? Niktsar Bayom Kosher. We said here's a Mishnah that says that if it was harvested during the day, our Mishnah just said it was harvested during the day. It's kosher. V'dochas Shabbos, and it violates Shabbos. That is a contradiction. Man shmasla de Amar Niktsar Bayom Kosher. Who's the opinion that said you're allowed to cut it during the day? That's Rabbi, right? Because Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon said you can't cut it during the day. Who's the one who says you can? That's Rabbi. The Katani, the Dochas Shabbos. And the Mishnah continues and says, and it pushes off Shabbos. My love leketzira. Doesn't it mean that what you're allowed to do is harvest? No. You're making a mistake. It's not the harvest that you're allowed to on Shabbos. It's lahakrava. It's the fact that you're supposed to burn the kamitza on the mizbeach. That's the malacha that you have no choice. Harvesting can be done beforehand, according to Rabbi. Okay, aval lektzira lo. Are you suggesting then that according to Rabbi, you're allowed to burn the kamitza on Shabbos, but you're not allowed to harvest the barley? V'hatanya. We learned in a brisa. Rabbi says, "Vayedaber Moshe as moadei Hashem." The pasuk says in Parshas Emor that Moshe told Bnei Yisrael the holidays of Hashem. Matam Elomer. Why is it? As a pasuk, of course, Moshe tells the Bnei Yisrael these holidays. What he's going to keep it to himself? So Lefisha lo lamadnu ella letamid Pesach shenembarhan b'moado. The answer is because we didn't learn any place else that the korbanos are allowed to push off Shabbos, right? How do I know if a musaf korban for a Yom Tov has to be brought? It comes if a Yom Tov comes out on Shabbos. I still bring the musaf offering for that Yom Tov on Shabbos. Doesn't say it because we only know that the korban tamid, which you have to bring every day, pushes off Shabbos, and the korban pesach because it says by korban pesach it says b'moado has to be brought at its right time. B'moado v'afilu b'Shabbos has to be brought even on its time, even on Shabbos. B'moado v'afilu b'tuma, right? It can be even brought on its right time, even if it's tamei, the korban pesach. Shar korbanos hatzibur minayin. How do I know the rest of these community offerings? Tamid lomar. That's this pasuk in Bamidbar that says Eila tasu la'Hashem b'moadechem. Right? These are the things that you should do in their proper times, on their holidays. Right? We always think of translate as b'moadechem, on their holidays, but it means literally on the time. You got to do it on time, even if it's Shabbos, even if it's Tameh, the korban goes on. Okay, so now minayin l'rabos omer hakariv imo. What about the korban haomer? Right, the korban haomer to include that, and also the sheep that comes along with it, and the shtei alechem v'hakariv imohen, and the 2 loaves of bread and the 2 sheep that come together with it. Talmud lomar. That's what this pasuk is for. Vayedaber Moshe as moadei Hashem. Hashem told over the holiday. Moshe told over the holidays of Hashem. Hakasav kava moed likulon. The Torah tells us that all of these offerings, everything has to be done at their proper time, and therefore they violate Shabbos. And even if it's tamei, you still bring them anyway. Okay, so now, Lemai, who says that what's going on here is to tell me that the Bryce is talking about that the 2 loaves of bread push off Shabbos. What's the part? What part of the shtei lechem is pushing off Shabbos? Are you talking about the burning of the shtei lechem? Right? Shtei lechem b'nei akrava, the 2 loaves of bread don't get burned. Right? The 2 loaves of bread are just 2 loaves of bread, and then you give them to the Kohen and he eats them. There's no other service, no kmitza by the 2 loaves of bread. There's nothing to burn. Ela pshita l'tchina veharkada. The answer is they must be making the bread, which means that they grind the flour and they sift the flour, and those are the Menachos that you're allowed to do. Udekavasa, and therefore that nevertheless violates Shabbos. You're allowed to do that. Udekavasa gabe omer likatira. So what's the comparable malacha that gets the omer ready for service that would push off Shabbos? The harvesting. You're allowed to harvest the grain. The kadachis a Shabbos. Seems that the pasuk is telling me that just like sifting and grinding is docha Shabbos to prepare for the shtei lechem, meaning that could theoretically be done beforehand. So too the harvesting of the omer can be done on Shabbos, even though theoretically that could be done earlier. So the answer is no. You're missing the point. It's leha krava. The malacha that you're allowed to do by the korban omer is the burning of the kmitza, right? Harvesting you could not do on Shabbos. Now the question you had is omer lechakrava u'shtei lechem. What's the 2 loaves of bread? The answer is le'afia. It's the baking of the shtei lechem. They ground the flour before Shabbos. They sifted it before Shabbos. They had all that ready. But you know what they didn't do? They may even have made dough out of it, but they did not bake it yet. They had to wait to Shabbos to bake it. Why? Because v'kasava Rabbi holds Toner Mekadesh. Must be that Rabbi holds that it becomes sanctified in the oven. The oven was a kli shares, was a service utensil. You bake that. You bake that bread, and now it becomes holy. What difference does that make? Because if you had baked it yesterday and then left it overnight, we have a psulina, right? You're not allowed to leave a korban overnight. So once it was baked, it became a korban. And so therefore, if it became a korban, it couldn't have been left overnight. Therefore, it had to be baked the day it was going to be brought. And therefore, the baking you can do on Shabbos, but not the grinding and the sifting and all that.
I think there was only one korban that you were allowed to do at night. Which one was it again?
The harvesting of the burning of the limbs we had said, right? So if you had baked it yesterday, if salol belina, you would have invalidated it by letting the korban stay overnight. So okay, now do you see what's going on, right, Eli? Now you've got the question is, can you harvest on Shabbos? The answer is no, but you've got a pasuk that says you can do malacha Shabbos. It's only the malacha of burning the korban omer, which you're allowed to do. And similarly, only the baking of the shtei lechem you can do. The preparations that can be done before Shabbos have to be done before Shabbos.
I thought you're not allowed. I thought there's no bishul. You can do bishul on Shabbos.
But you can for the korban. That's what the pasuk says. Baking is not, because the baking sanctifies it. That's what we're suggesting. Rabbi holds that the baking turns it into a korban.
Basically, it depends when the Kedusha takes place.
When's the Kedusha take place? Exactly. Here's the problem, right? We're suggesting now that Rabbi holds the Kedusha happens when you put it in the oven. Necessarily true. V'savar Rabbi Tanor Mekadesh. Does Rabbi really hold that it becomes sanctified in the oven? Ve'hatanya. We learn in a brisa. Kiv seyatzeres in mekadjen es halechem ela bashchita. When do the 2 loaves of bread become sanctified? When you slaughter the 2 sheep that go with it. Remember, we had learned that the sheep get connected to the bread. When you shecht the sheep, then the bread becomes consecrated. Ketzad, how does this work? Shachton lishman, if you did the shchita of the sheep of the Shavuos, and you did it l'shem the korban, v'zarak daman lishman, and then you threw the blood for the sake of the korban of Shavuos, kadesh halechem. Then the bread becomes sanctified. Shachton shalom lishman, if you do the shchita of the sheep, and you do the shechita not for the sake of a korban. V'zarak daman shalishman, and then you throw the blood and you don't have it l'shem the mitzvah of the korban. So lo kadosh halechem, then the lechem is not sanctified. Then shachtan lishman v'zarak es daman shalo lishman. If you shacht it as for the sake of the korban. Then you throw the blood shelo lishma. So alechem kadosh ve'eno kadosh. We had said the bread is holy and not holy. Well, we had discussed a week ago. Right? What does that mean? It's holy and it's not holy. The answers became combined to the korban, but it's not completely as far as pigul and all those other rules. Okay, so but that's what we discussed over there. So divrei Rebbe. That's what Rebbe holds. So we're going to point out Rebbe is clearly holding. When does the bread become sanctified? The bread becomes sanctified when you slaughter the sheep, not when you bake it. So that means you could have baked it yesterday. Brought the bread in and sanctified it when you slaughtered the animal. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar says, "Li'ol ameno kadosh ad sheyishchot l'shemon v'yizrok daman l'shmo shelo l'shman." Rabbi Elazar disagrees. He says it is holy when you slaughter it for the sake of the korban, and then you throw the blood that is not for the sake of the korban. Okay, but in any event, question is on Rebbe. Right? Amar Rav Nachum bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachum bar Yitzchak explains, hukbavu velo hukbavu kamar. No, the sanctification, the fact that the bread gets kedushas haguf, gets sanctified, that happens when you bake it. The time that the bread gets connected to the sheep, that happens when you slaughter the sheep. Remember, there is a difference of importance of the bread being connected to the sheep or not. What happens if the bread is connected to the sheep and then a bird comes down and eats the bread? Now you got a problem because this bread was connected to the korban. You got to bring new sheep, right? You can't continue without the bread anymore. So that's what it means to be connected. But the bread itself became sanctified when you baked it. So that's what Rebbe Shita is. That's why you can bake the shtei lechem on Shabbos.
You only connect in regards to being ma'atim and Shabbos.
That's correct. That's what he means. Even though he uses the word kadosh, it means hukba'u. Hadron alach Rabbi Yishmael, Hadron alach Rabbi Yishmael, Hadron alach Rabbi Yishmael, and that ends the sixth parak.
Breathtaking.
Wow.
It is breathtaking, exactly. Onward we move.
Wow. Volume 3.
Mishnah says, Ve'elu menachos nikmatzos. These are the korban minchas that you take a kmitza from them. V'shiyarehen lekohanim. And then the leftover, after you take the shirayim out, right, you can eat, the kohanim get to eat it. Here's the list. Mincha soles, right, the fine flour offering. Machvas, the pan offering. The marchashas, the deep fried offering. Ve'hachalos, and the oven-baked offering that was made chalos, and the rekikin and the wafers that were oven-baked. That is the first 5. Those are nidavos, the ones that you're donating. Minchas ovdei kochavim, a mincha brought by non-Jews. Minchas nashim, a mincha that's brought by women. Minchas haomer, the korban mincha of the omer. Minchas chote, the korban mincha brought by somebody who does an avera that he has to bring a korban ola v'yorei. Minchas knos, the sota offering, which is brought from barley, and all of those you take kamitza off of them, and the rest of them are consumed by the kohen. Rabbi Shimon Omer, minchas chote shel kohanim. Rabbi Shimon says, even the minchas chote, if a kohen brings it, right? We talked about that the mincha of a kohen doesn't get eaten by a kohen. Says Rabbi Shimon, despite the fact that nobody's going to eat it, you still do the kmitza. The kohet's...
Why can't the kohen eat, another kohen eat carbon from another kohen?
It just simply says that a kohen can, once that a korban that is brought by a kohen is not eaten. Is not eaten.
Does anyone else eat it instead?
No. Then it's bread. We're going to see, right? What do you do is you have to do the kmitza, huh?
Special drasha.
Yeah. That's right. So it's nikmetzes, right? You do kmitza, the kometz karv latzma, and then you burn the kometz, v'shirayim krevim latzman, and the leftovers are burned also, but separately. Right? First you burn the kmitza, then you burn the rest.
So it's like a somewhat ola.
Right? The Tanakama, yeah, but the Tanakama says, no kmitza, just burn the whole thing. Why bother doing a kmitza when you're just going to burn it? Okay, so that's the argument. Amar Rav Papa says, for the third time, Kol hecha ditnan, eser tnan. Whenever there's a list, there's 10 on this list. Right? My kamash malon, why is he giving us this, telling us that the list of korbanos is always 10. Lafuki Rabbi Shimon, it's to tell us that Rabbi Shimon is incorrect. Damar, because he says, mechza chalos mechza rekikin. If you say that a person pledges to bring an oven-baked offering, he can bring an offering that is of the type that mixes chalos together with rakikin. So then yavi, he can bring that. Kamash malon delo, he can't, because if that was an eligible offering, that would be offering type number 11. You could bring chalos, you can bring rakikin, you can bring a chalos and rakikin, right? So that would add on another one. And since we only have got 10, not all of them. Other interpretation that we had mentioned before is that when we say it's 10, it means that you have to bring all 10 of one type. So therefore, whenever it's mentioned, it has to be all rakikin of 10, or chalos of 10, not some combination of the two. Okay? Then the next thing, v'shiyarehen lekohanim, the leftovers after the kmitza gets eaten by the kohen. Minolan, where do I know that is true? Because the pasuk says, minolan, dechsiva ksiva, by several of the menachos, it's said explicitly that they are given to the kohen. Udelo ksiva, and even when it's not written specifically in that parsha, so nevertheless, ksivba, it says, in this week's parsha, zos toras mincha, this is the rule by the mincha, hakrev osa b'nei Aaron, that Aaron and the children shall bring it, v'hanoseres mimeno yochlu Aaron uvanov. Varshas tzav, right? So the leftover, Aaron and his children shall eat it. So therefore, that's the rule by all menachos, unless otherwise eliminated from the list. Okay, now, ba'achitin lo komi boilon. Now, we never really asked, so we weren't really wondering what the source is for wheat offerings. You're right, the psukim say it, right? So anything comes from wheat wasn't a question. And that's why the pasuk says Zos Torah Mincha. This is the rule of the mincha, and then all of the menachos that are listed in this week's parsha are all wheat offerings. There's nothing on the list that's a barley offering. So maybe, right? Kikami boilon ba'asorin. We were asking, how do you know the barley ones, right? The barley ones, the korban omer and the minchas knos, which are in our Mishnah as ones that are brought and eaten by the kohen. So ba'asorin nami. Well, even the seorin ones, we didn't have a question really either. Why? Because once we know by reading those sections in the Torah that talk about those offerings, there's a kmitza. And if there's a kmitza, why are you bothering to do a kmitza? So that you can eat the leftovers. Otherwise, you just burn the whole thing. So liba de rabbanon lo kami bayin. We weren't asking according to the rabbanon. You're right. According to the rabbanon, the kmitza indicates everything else you can eat. Ki kami bayin liba de Rabbi Shimon. We meant to ask the question according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that a kmitza can be brought even though you're burning it anyway. So that's the question. Da Amar de Rabbi Shimon da Amar ika mincha de mikamtso velo misachla. Rabbi Shimon was the one who said, you can bring a korban mincha, do kmitza, and burn it anyway. So therefore, the question is, if I've got a barley offering, just because it tells me I can do kmitza, doesn't mean that I can eat it. Ditnan, look at our Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon says, minchas chote shel kohanim nikmetzas. If I have a minchas chote of kohanim, and it gets it's going to get a kmitza. V'hakometz karev be'atzmo. And the kmitza gets burned by itself, v'ashirayim craven atzmon, and the leftovers are also burned themselves. So you see, they're not eaten. So how do I know that the korban sota, not the korban haomer, and the what's the other one? The korban haomer is mincha, and the minchas knos, the korban sota. Yes. How do I know those two are eaten? So Amar Chizkiah, so Chizkiah says, Da Amar Kra, Pasuk. Again, this week's parsha says, V'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva. All menachos, whether they are mixed with oil or they are dry, l'kol b'nei Aaron tiyah, are eaten by Aaron. So now, imeno inin leblula shachitin. As you said, we already know that all of the menachos, whether they're mixed with oil or not mixed with oil, once there's a kmitza, they are eaten by Aaron and Kohanim. So tneu inyan belula shel seorin. So we're going to include also the korbanos that are made from barley and are mixed with oil. If it's not going to apply to the dry offerings, the ones that have no oil, by wheat, because we already know those are eaten by kohanim, then tenehu inyan chareva shel seorin, it must be telling us the dry offerings of barley, that those are also eaten by kohanim. Okay, now, v'ha lahachi hu da'asa. Is that how you interpret this pasuk? we already knew this pasuk. We already needed this pasuk for something else. Now we quote a very long brisa.
Hold your breath.
And this long brisa goes all the way onto the next page, and the whole point is to be able to look out for this pasuk, right? This pasuk that tells us this pasuk v'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chariva, which we just tried to use to prove that Kohanim eat barley offerings. We're going to use it for something else, and that's where we're going to get stuck. Minayin she'ein cholkin menachos keneged zecharim. Right? How do I know that what I say is zvachim. I can't read, right? Minayin she'ein cholkin menachos keneged zvachim. How do I know that Kohanim can't trade their offerings? Now, why would they do that? So the Kohanim, so here's the deal. Here's what happens. The Kohanim would serve in a rotation, right? There's 24 different families, approximately 48 weeks of the year, plus the Yom Tovim, where everybody was serving. So they served for 2 weeks out of the year. Okay, each of the families then subdivided into 6, so that each group within the base Av in the family got 1 day of service during that week. Okay, when you show up to service, every Kohen who's at service that day is entitled to a portion of every offering that's brought that day. You bring a Korban Tzibur that day, everybody's supposed to bring a bit of it, even though the small amount that you might get from it might be less than a kazayas, a little drop. So a Kohen might say like this, what do I need a couple of crumbs of that offering for? Let's make a deal. You could take my portion of this animal offering, and I'll take your portion of the mincha offering. That way I can get like a piece of bread at least, right? Get something together. I don't have to get a piece of this, a piece of this, piece of this. You take, I'll give you my little piece of meat. That way you have a bigger piece of meat, and I'll get a bigger piece of bread. You cannot do that, right? Can't trade it. It's not, we're going to see, it's not really derech eretz to go trading your korban, right? You get a piece, that's your piece. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, "V'chol mincha asher te'afeh b'tanur." All of the mincha that is baked in the oven, l'kol b'nei Aaron. Again, this week's parasha, l'kol b'nei Aaron tiyeh ish ke'achiv. Right? It should be distributed to all the children of Aaron, every person just like his brother. Meaning that all the offerings have to be distributed to all the Kohanim that are on service that day. Yachol lo yachleku menachos keneged zvachim. You might think that what's the problem? Making a trade for a mincha offering for an animal offering, because they're not of similar quality or type. Shelo kamu tachtein bedolus. Because when you do a korban olav yored, if you can't bring an animal, you don't jump right to a mincha, right? You go from animal to bird to grain. So you don't go right. Animals and grain offerings are way different. So aval yachloku menachos keneged ofos, but maybe you could trade a bird offering for an animal offering, shahare kamu tachtein bedalos, because they're right next to each other as far as the hierarchy is concerned. So therefore, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, "V'chol naaseh b'marchashes l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh." Anything that's made in the frying pan should go to all of the Kohanim. Right? So from the extra, we're just basically learning extra words in this pasuk. Every phrase in the extra word of this pasuk tells me what trades I cannot do. So I'm not even allowed to trade a mincha, right? If you get a mincha, you got to give it to all the Kohanim. You cannot trade that mincha for an animal korban. Yachol lo yachleku minachos keneged ofos. I might think I can't trade a mincha for a bird offering, shahalalu mine damim v'halalu mine kamachim, because they're totally different. One's a living thing with blood, and one is a piece of some grain. Way different. But yachloku ofos keneged zvachim. I might be able to trade birds for animals. Shahalalu v'halalu mine damim. Both of them are living creatures. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, v'machvas l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. Also, the frying pan should be delivered to everything that's done on the machvas, should also be given to all the sons of Aaron. From that extra pasuk tells me, can't even trade that. Yachol lo yachliku ofos keneged zvachim. You might think I'm not allowed to trade, fine, I'm not allowed to trade birds for animals. Halalu asiyasam biyad, v'halalu asiyasam bekli. After all, one has shchita with the fingernail, one has shchita with a knife, so they're very different. Aval yachliku menachos keneged menachos, but I can trade one mincha offering for another mincha offering. She'elu ve'elu asiyasam biyad, because after all, both of them are basically kmitza offerings. So what's the problem? Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, "V'chol mincha belula b'shemen," all offerings that are soaked in oil, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, they have to go to everybody. Every time it says l'chol b'nei Aaron again, tells me no, they can't distribute another offering. Fine. Maybe it's mincha offerings that can't trade because they're different types. The frying pan offering is different than the deep fried offering, and vice versa.
When you say frying pan, you mean someone who fries the meat on the pan?
No, bread. The machvas offering, the bread, right? The dough, frying the dough. Shazo ma'aseh caution, because when you fry the dough that way, it becomes crispy, like the flatbread, right? Mm-hmm. And vizu ma'aseh rachin, and the other one is soft, like a donut. So aval yachluku machvas keneged machvas, right? But I can take flatbread and trade it for other flatbread, and marchashes keneged marchashes, and the donuts for the donuts, those I could trade. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, no, v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, again, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, can't trade that either. Yacholu yachleku b'kodshei kodshim. You might think, okay, you know what I can't trade? I can't trade the kodshei kodshim offerings, because you have to treat those with super respect. Aval yachleku b'kodshei kalim, but you can still trade your kodshei kalim, right? Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, no, ish ke'achiv. It says, every man to his brother, v'im al toda, even if it's a toda offering. Couple psukim later, Toda offering is kodshei kalim, and that's included. I can't trade that either. Kishem she'ein cholkin bekodshei kodshim, just like I can't trade my kodshei kodshim offerings. Kach ein cholkin bekodshim kalim, I can't trade even the kodshei kalim. Ish, now on the side it says ish, it has to be a man. Ish cholek vafilu balmum, right? When you distribute portions of the korbanos to the kohanim, you distribute it to any adult men. Even if that man can't do the service because he has a mum, he's still eligible to receive a portion. Whereas a child, a minor, can't do the service. Therefore, even if he doesn't have a mum, he can't get a portion. Okay?
Why is it an older guy with a mum is allowed to get a portion but not a kid?
Sorry?
Why is it an older person with a mum?
Because he's an ish, because the pasuk says ish, right? All men get a distributed portion. Okay, so now, how can you learn this pasuk about the shiuri minchos, right, of the seorim can be eaten? This pasuk, we just used this bryce for this pasuk about the distribution of the korbanos. So the answer is, hahu mikol nafka. The answer is, this bryce comes from the word kol. Right, the chizkiah that is learned from the word mincha, that every mincha is being able to be eaten by the kohanim. The fact that it always has to be distributed to all kohanim comes from the word kol. So it's different words.
All or voice?
All with a kaf, not a kuf. V'ha apikte lik Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda, but still. The word kol, we already used it on Daf Samach Gimel Beis above in order to teach us the drasha of Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda, right? As far as the mincha of the mafas tanur, that he holds that you can bring it from 5 chalos and 5 rikikin, and the Rabbanan say you can't do that. He uses it for that pasuk, kol, you can do it in any way. So the answer is elahu mi vechol. He's got an extra vav there. So that's from the vechol. So we've got all the drashas in this pasuk. Not a problem. Okay, good. So now we know where we understand the kohanim can eat the barley offerings. Ravina Amar, Ravina says, I'll tell you a different source. I'll show you another source where you know that the kohanim can eat all of the barley offerings. Midatani Levi. It's from what Levi learned. Datani Levi taught as follows, as far as the matanos kahuna, the gifts that are given to the kohen, which are in Bamidbar Yud Ches. Right? It says, Lekol karbanam ulekol minchasam, all of their offerings, all of their mincha offerings, ulekol chatasam, all their sin offerings, ulekol ashmam, all their guilt offerings. Those go to Aaron. So now, kol karbanam, whenever it says kol, it comes to include something besides, right? If it just said korbanam, that would mean the kohanim get their sacrifices. Kol korbanam means something in addition to that. So what does it come to in addition to? L'rabos lug shemen shel mitzorah. That oil that comes with the mitzorah's offering, that also goes to the kohanim. Why would you think not? Salka daita chamina, I would have thought min ha'esh. The pasuk says, it says right before that in the pasuk, that whatever comes from the fire, meaning it has to be a korban, kasav rachmana. So therefore, kamash malan. So therefore, it says kol korban, to tell me, even the oil, which is not burned on fire, is also the Kohen's. The Kohen gets that as well. Then it says l'kol minchasam, that you're going to get all and minchas. So what is that coming? L'rabos minchas ha'omer u'minchas knos. To tell me that the korban mincha of the omer and the korban mincha of the knos, which are made from barley, can be eaten. So that's his source, right? The barley offerings can be eaten. Because salkadai tachamina, I would have thought, v'achlu osam asher kupar bahem. The pasuk says that the Kohen gets to eat whatever he created an atonement through them, Amar Rachmana. Hi, these korbanos, the korban omer and the korban sota, those are not kaparos. There's no atonement. It's lahatir ka'asya. One is coming to allow us to eat the new grain. Ve'idach nami, the other one is levarar ka'asya. It's only coming to clarify whether she did an avera or not. There's no kapara in them. So kamash malan, no, the Kohen still gets to eat those. Then it says l'kol chatasam, all of their sin offerings. L'rabos chatas ha'of comes to tell us that the Kohen even gets to eat the korban chatos. That's a bird offering. Because salka daita chamina, I would have thought the Kohen doesn't get to eat the chatas that's a bird offering. Why? Because it's nevela. It's nevela. Remember, it's being killed with a fingernail. So Kamash Malan tells us, no, Kohen gets to eat that too. Lechol ashamam, all of their guilt offerings, that's l'rabos asham nazir v'asham mitzorah comes to include the korban asham of a nazir and the korban asham of the mitzorah. We'd say, why would that not be included? Well, 1 second. Well, asham mitzorah behedjik siba. You don't need to include the asham of the mitzorah because that's written right in the pasuk. Ki kachatas ha'asham hu lakohen. Just like the chatas, the asham also goes to the Kohen. So we already know that the mitzorah one goes to the Kohen. Ella, what we meant to say is the rabbos asham nazir ka asham mitzorah, to tell us that the asham nazir goes to the Kohen, just like the asham of the mitzorah does. Because salkadai tachamid, I would have thought to have said lehachshir kaasi, that the korban of the nazir isn't an atonement offering either. It's only coming to allow the nazir to be finished from being a nazir. Now he can become tamei lameis again. He can drink wine again. So it's
after he gave the korban, it wasn't he wants to become a nazir again.
and that's like he could become, and he can do whatever he wants afterwards, right? But this korban only comes to permit and stop him from being a nazir. Kamash malan, that the Kohen gets that as well. Asher yashivu, then that which they will return as well. The Kohen gets if ze gezel hager, if somebody steals from a convert and then the convert dies and there's no relatives to return it to, who does the thief return it to? The answer is he gives it to the Kohanim, right? That's what that comes to include. Lecha hi ulavanecha. The pasuk says that it continues on. It will be to you and to your children. Shecha hi ulavanecha afilu lekadesh bo esa isha. It's yours and your children's, meaning you can even use it to marry somebody with. It is not holy, and the Kohen gets to use it. It's that it's not holy at all. So if the Kohen decides that he's going to take this, somebody stole a wedding ring from a goy, and now it gets returned to a Kohen, and he wants to use it to marry his girlfriend, then no problem.
But if you tell the Kohen was stolen, would still be no problem?
If you tell the Kohen it's stolen, what do you mean?
Because it's still
The Kohen knows it's stolen, that's why he's getting it, right? He's getting the mitzvah is the thief has to return it. So he's going to return it. Amar Ravuna. Ravuna says, Shalmei ha'ovdi kochavim, when a non-Jew brings a korban shlamim, it has the rule of ke'olos. It's like it's olos. You bring them as an ola. The Kohen does not get a portion of that. You burn the entire thing. Ibois ema kra. Either there's a pasuk that tells me that's true, v'ibois ema svara, or there's a logic to that. Let's start with the svara. Ibois ema svara. What's the logic to that? So he says, Ove kochavim libo l'shemayim. Why does a non-Jew send a korban to the Beis HaMikdash? Because he wants to daven to Hashem. He's not thinking, I want to send a present to Kohanim. So therefore, you bring it as an olah.
We want to daven to Hashem, but when a non-Jew davens to Hashem, isn't he like bowing down to an idol in a way?
No, because he knows there's a difference. There's idols and there's Hashem. So he's an idol worshiper. You're right. He's not worshiping idols. But now he wants to give a coin to Hashem. So therefore he sends it to the Beis HaMikdash. But he's not intending to give it to the Kohen. V'ibois imakra, or there's a pasuk. The pasuk says, Asher yakrivu la Hashem le'olah, you shall bring it as an offering to Hashem as an olah. Called the mikarvi olah lahavi. Anytime a non-Jew, this pasuk is talking about non-Jewish offerings, anytime a non-Jew brings a korban, it becomes an olah. So, let's stop here.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Go ahead.